All right, hello everybody. Did the sound stop? I couldn't quite figure it out. I'm gonna just check my own little sound here. Okay, it sounds like it's okay. I have no idea why the sound was doing that. That's DM Hoki's fault. He's our technical guy. I don't know what was going on with that scene, man. It has to be really my fault, but you know, we gotta blame somebody. Okay, so as the monthly show, I've been doing this for years, even before Chess Dojo existed. I've been doing this show, and the idea is very simple. I want to encourage people to analyze their own games, and me doing this just gives you the incentive, hopefully, to analyze your own games deeply, usually without the computer, and then I give some thoughts on it. Right? And whenever I do this analysis, I never use the computer myself. That isn't to say that the computer is a terrible thing, just that you can turn on the computer by yourself. You don't need me to be there for the computer. This is just my human take on a lot of the moves and decisions that were made. We're gonna change the format a little bit, but I'm gonna get into the change of the format for next month and going forward later on, just so that we get more people into the chat. Now, first we have an epic game, and I'm really excited about it. I was thinking about it a lot, and yeah, I even showed it to some students. Very interesting struggle. So we're gonna get into Julio's game. I'm calling him Julio. He might call himself some other name. I'm just going with the G going as a Julio sound. I don't know. Historically, I have forgotten to switch between this scene and the main scene with the actual board. And then if I forget, you have to scream at me in big purple letters, or maybe even do the fancy thing where you say something, where you get DM Hoki or somebody to start speaking to us. I don't even know how that trick is done. I just know that some of you have that incredible capacity. Okay, when I start analyzing the game, I'm usually pretty bad about looking at chat. Just because I'm so involved in the game itself. I will try to look at the chat, but generally I'm like really focused in on some of the interesting decisions that were going on in the game, but I'll try. Okay, so here we go. Let's start. And as always, I have the wrong game lined up, of course, but that's easy to change. As always, what you see in the right-hand side of your screen are the notes that were done by the player. And I always put these notes in there because A, I don't always read them off, and B, I want you to gain a sense of what valuable notes are. We've been doing this for a long time, and a lot of people have gotten much better at doing notes, and it is a skill to do notes, and once that skill will definitely help you in your own chess, mostly because it will force you to put words on the subconscious concepts that are actually guiding your thinking in the game. Okay, so here we go, and we're gonna flip the board because Julio is black here. In fact, let's change this up here. Let's say black is Julio here. And he's better than 1600, so we're just going to put in Julio. All right. So one of the fascinating things about this game is Julio is going to channel Kostya and a system that Kostya put forward. Now I'm going to guess Kostya would rather Julio play d6 here. That is the normal way. But it should be stressed that if white plays e5 here, it's not actually the end of the world. And I actually had this once with against Soviet Grandmaster Gutman ages ago, and I just knew that e5 was good, but I didn't really understand the position. And black plays d6 next, and he's mostly fine. Maybe white has a small advantage. Anyways, that is not the subject of our discussion today. It is the same-ish, and this very interesting system that Kostya puts forward now with a6. And where it gets incredibly interesting and spicy is Kostya wants now black to play b5, kind of Benko gambit style. Okay. So I want to claim this. I'm not a King's Indian expert. I'm a King's Indian fan, but I'm not a King's Indian expert. I want to claim that the precursor to this immediate b5 is c6 first, followed by b5, just in terms of how the idea developed, if you will. And c6 isn't, it might look really weird, but it's not completely ridiculous. You're dominating the knight on c3 and you're getting the queen out. So in any case, then the question simply becomes, well, can or should white take this pawn? And, you know, Julio claims he's 1600. Honestly, he plays much better than that in this game, but he's playing somebody who's much higher rated. And definitely this is a selling point for Kostya and his videos on openings, where I think the value of a good opening is not something where you sit and learn 1,000 lines and you stay up late at night, but just some basic system where somebody explains to you, like, all right, this is what's going on. Now, the difficulty and the interesting part for me is coming up, the decisions that black's going to have to make. And white, there's going to be a lot of them coming forward. Now, I want to say here that I can imagine that c takes b5 is the most principled move here for white. And I think Julio gives this variation here with c6 now, though I'm sure black could do other things. And I just want to say, as white, I would feel real nervous about this. Like, maybe I would convince myself to do it just because it's the principled thing to do, and what else am I supposed to do? But it would be very hard for me to accept that pawn whilst the king is on e1. Now, by the way, we got to say, with this whole thing that white is doing, one of the things I want to stress is, obviously, white is down in time, in development, because he's done moves like f3 and knight e2, 4 pawn moves, and knight e2, he's going to have to move the knight again someday. And what it's about, of course, is it's about a claim that white is making of space. And so this loss in time has to be compensated by the more abstract spatial gains that white is going to try to maintain throughout the game. And I think that's one of the key things that black should say in the notes, just being like, oh, you know, I'm fighting for some kind of quick compensation against the space before I get squeezed to death. And one of the reasons I mention that now is I think b5 in the Benko is very much about distracting white from the center and then later the king's side, getting enough play over there. It's not necessarily even that you're going to win on the queen side, but just create enough drama there that white doesn't burn you, squeeze you to death. And we're going to get a Benko-like question right away after knight c1, namely, this happens in the Benko too. What is the purpose of b5? Is it to take on c4, or is it to play b4? Now, let me just frame it, if you will, with the Benko, and say this position. It is totally acceptable for white to play a passing move like knight f3 or queen c2. They sometimes transpose. And what's interesting is most Benko players will just play g6, right? And they're saying if cb will play a6, you know, we can keep that in reserve. And the interesting thing is, I think the cue for us to play b4 would be if white plays knight c3. So the b pawn then functions as a way to kick the white knight away from its central control. BC is, of course, possible, and we're going to see that in the game. But it's my first big decision here. When I say mine, I just mean as somebody who is observing this game. Well, what should black do in this position? Now, he could play knight d7. As mentioned, he could play something like c6. He could play takes, as in the game, and he could push. Personally, I think he should push. That's my sense. The knight, I don't want the knight on c3. Let's push him away from the center. And let's also say, and this is going to be a theme of the game, white has more space, but he's got some funky pieces, and the knight on c1 is part of that funk. I'm sure white had like studied deeply the same-ish stuff and had seen that a bunch of strong GMs have played knight c1 in similar positions, and it was funky in those games too, right? One of the things you've heard me say on the show before, it is one of the hardest aspects of chess, and in particular modern chess, to play with the space advantage. I say especially with modern chess because the computer loves the space advantage. You give it almost any position with a space advantage and it's just going to love it, which is why King's Indian in general, the computer hates it. But that doesn't mean, the King's Indian's toast. It just means that A, white players would need to understand how to play like the computer, and B, is the computer actually overvaluing the space advantage that white gets. Okay, so big decision. I thought b4 was the cleanest here. So takes. Now, the controversy about taking is that we have developed a bishop, and then we have to ask, is the bishop useful on c4? Is the bishop useful on c4? And that's going to be one of our big questions going forward. So, knight d7, castles, and c5. And this is the fact that black can play c5 like this is an example of why a6 b5 is more efficient than playing c6 and b5 a little slower, right? Okay, so fascinating position. I spent a lot of time on these positions, and I showed them to some students of mine, and I think this is a good instructive position for white. What should white do? Now, he plays d5, and I feel like that's probably the natural instinct of a same-ish player, right? Probably he had seen lines like that. But I got a lot of problems with d5. First is you lost the tempo. Second is, because it's a pawn move, pawns aren't people. Second is you blocked your bishop on c4. And, now we're going to get this interesting structure. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So just in terms of a gut instinct, I want to get this knight in immediately. So I think white should take this thing, and then whether black takes back with the knight or the pawn to bring the knight out. After which, maybe white's a little bit better. I don't have any strong convictions on that, but I would like that much better for white than what we get in the game. Okay, now, like I said, a lot of interesting moments in this game. Here we are to another one. How should black play? While you're thinking of that, I'll tell a little story. I got this new chess coach. I call him KGB because he's an old Soviet dude. And one of the things he's just been yelling at me nonstop about, just nonstop, is that I'll get a position like this in an actual game, and I'll just think about it forever, man. And he forces me, I was writing down the time of my moves anyway, but he's really on me about situations where I'm tanking. And, for us analyzing now, it's absolutely appropriate for us to spend forever thinking about the different plans black has at his disposal, because that will kind of give us a vocabulary for plans when we're actually playing. But the Soviet is really clear that, hey, buddy, hey, this was ultimately going to be an intuitive decision, and I don't want you thinking forever on the intuitive decisions, because you're going to need time later when we actually have to calculate. And that's when I want you to spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes, when you have some very difficult position. Okay, so first I'm going to tell you what I think the Soviets' move would be. I think the Soviet would look at this and say, you know what? I'm just going to play rook b8. And why? Because I have no idea what white's going to do. Knight b3, queen e2, queen c2, queen d2. I got no idea what the guy's going to do, but I know that rook b8 can't be wrong. So white is going to have a difficult decision in front of him. I don't know. If I was white, I don't know which of those moves I would pick. And then we'll figure it out. And the other plans we have coming up next for black are knight b6, knight e5, queen somewhere. We got all kinds of things going on. And what white does will give us some information. Okay, I wanted us to think about d5, this structure, for a second, just to give you a point of comparison. Let's go back to this normal Benko. Let's call it normal anyway. And imagine snip, snop, and pop. This is a variation, I think it's still popular, but when I was a kid it was kind of invented, and it seems really weird. But I just want to give you a comparison. Now, there's a variety of things black can do, but I just want to show the general idea. Namely, we're going to get a structure very similar to the game. I'm sure there's other moves besides knight d2. I think a4 is a big move for white, for example. But the thing I wanted to stress is this, I think, is a much more favorable version of the structure than white gets in the game, right? And one of the things I want to also say about this is that part of the interesting drama, we're going to get this in the game too, is if black ever plays a5, then there's a big hole on b5, right? So that's a way for white to play. And one of the beauties about this move b6, just tossing the pawn, is to say, I'm not interested, black, in your pawns. I'm not interested in your pawns, buddy. I'm interested in squeezing the life out of you, in particular with restricting your minor pieces. All right, let's go back to the game. So that's why d5 feels wrong to me. Now, black's next move, I think, can't be wrong. It cannot be wrong, but the follow-up, I think, is debatable, or is harder to find. And so he plays knight e5. We're going to talk about it. Another plan that you could do also after rook b8, if you decided to, would be knight b6 and e6. And in general, for the Benko players I coach, I don't want them to make this move, but the rationale for busting up your center a little bit like this is very simple, that white's knight is stupid, and we're going to try to bust the game open before white is properly coordinated. You know, it's funny with e6 too, because we're going to see e6 in a position that later I'm a little bit more suspicious of. And just for the Benko players, let's just admire this structure. You know, what a beautiful structure. Now, of course, we don't want to play knight b6 unless we're going to play e6. So let's stick with black's intuition. Knight e5, bishop e2. Sorry, I have a little cough today. And here's where a difficult moment for black about what to do. Let's state some obvious things. Oh, by the way, another plan that wasn't mentioned, a very typical Benko plan, would be knight e8, c7, intending knight b5, something like that. In any case, let's do this. And white is not yet threatening f4, should be said, because of knight eg4. But if you get frisky with a move like e6, then you're going to get hit with f4. So there's all kinds of permutations where f4 is going to get hit, going to work. So if I play knight e8, I'm going to get hit with f4. Okay. Now I want to say with f4, it's not necessarily about crushing your king or anything immediate like that. It's mostly about making your pieces terrible. And that is what the space advantage is about. And that's why it's so hard. It's hard to keep mentally your opponent's pieces corralled. Let's say something else obvious. The knight on c1 is terrible, but it does not want to play knight d3. It does not, because that would trade off a minor, and that's in the Benko. That is the dream. In the Benoni, that is the dream. You want to trade some minors off to alleviate the spatial disadvantage that you're suffering under. Okay, so I think rook b8 would be a good move. And there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on here for black. Once you commit to knight e5, you got to tell yourself this is a very dynamic decision that you've made, and you are going to have to get ready for some fancy footwork. You know, like if bishop d7, then you got to worry about h3 with a firm f4 coming up because you don't have this retreat square. Okay, so here it gets a poor move, black's first poor move of the game, a5, and he correctly says that white should have immediately pounced on it with a4. And I think maybe just stare at it for a second. This comes up in that other Benko line that I was talking about earlier. There will be a grip, a full-on grip of the light squares on the queen side. And the main effect of that will be that black won't have any play on that side of the board. And then after we squish that play on the queen side, we can then do the inevitable f4s and maybe even g4, g5s of this fine world. Okay. What is the rating of these guys? Well, Julio claims he's only 1,600, but I think he's stronger, much stronger, and the other guy's 2,200, and this is an over-the-board game. So, knight b5, question mark, a4, exclam, absolutely. Now we're in business. Now we're in full business because the b5 square cannot be held anymore, and you have just developed your rook on a8. Rook b1. Now, his opponent criticized queen b6, and it's certainly true, I think, that a move like bishop d7 is more natural. But let's give it a break. It's okay. It's got to be okay. The guy plays b3. Okay. Bishop d7. Fine. And here's where I feel like maybe some familiarity with the Benko positions would be good. I think you should just take on b3, you know? And let's give your business here. And you give queen b4, maybe. Well, you're right. Just at the very least, let's just say you make a move like queen c7. I love your position, man. I love it. You could do other things too. But the general Benko rule is, once you've got a weakness on the queen side, and here, by the way, you're not even down a pawn. Once you have a weakness on the queen side, then you will have enough play to generate the business against that weakness, right? Now, granted, here, it's a little hot because I think white's going to want to play h3, and it's going to get a little hot. But let me tell you, if you didn't want it to be hot, you shouldn't have been playing this opening, man. You shouldn't have been playing this opening if you didn't want it to get hot. Yeah. Okay, more could be said about this, but I just think the main thing is I felt like you made it a little complicated for yourself here. Queen c2, a3. I still like your position, but now you don't have the open lines on the queen side. Knight d1, you write, I wasn't expecting this one. I wasn't expecting it either. I wasn't expecting it either. That looks totally weird. And you write that h3 should be critical. I totally agree. Let's focus on his move and your position. What should you do? Here I feel like you're doing great. And we should say that a lot of times when a player is trying to squeeze you with space, in order to take advantage, to not take advantage of your minor pieces, which he wants to dominate, he'll do crazy things like move his own minors way out of the way so that they don't get traded off. And that's what we're seeing here. And obviously it's controversial. Who knows how this is going to go? This might not end well. Okay. So I think, like I said, I think you're doing great. And I see two moves that I like. Personally, I like this move, rook fc8, intending c4. Just feel like you're going to crush the guy. And I showed this to a student of mine, and he came up with rook fb8, also intending c4. I like mine a little bit better because I want to get some juice on the queen on c2. But this one I analyzed with him too, and it just seemed very, very nice. One thing is funny, I started talking about the juice, and maybe that's from this new word, the juicer. I don't know. But I don't know. I don't actually understand how to correctly use the word juicer in a sentence, but the juice, I do understand the juice. Okay. So in this position, black plays e6 and writes finally. So I feel like that's where, this is where the game starts, in my mind, this is where the game starts turning a little bit. Namely, in this position, you have no structural problems. You're not even down a pawn. Like, let's say we take away the a3 pawn. Let's just lift it off the board. Do I like black? Yeah, you've got a great Benko position. You've got a great Benko position. And here, this a3 pawn, well, it can still become a bit of a monster. There's possibilities, they're not too hard to imagine, where you start taking stuff on b3 and then a big party gets started. Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I think me and the student came up with the following variation. Rook fc8, h3, c4, f4, cb, queen takes, and now pawn takes. Why pawn takes? Because otherwise my knight's going to land there, and then everything will just be joy and Brahms and the whole thing. So a takes, and now in this interesting position, I believe we came up with knight e4. Wait, let me make sure. Actually, it was very intense. It was very intense here. I better get it right. It was like a2, rook a1, rook c1, bishop c1, knight e4, fe, bishop e5, bishop e, knight here. And I think this was winning. I think this, it was at least a good deal. In any case, I'm getting a little bit astray. A little bit astray. In any case, right, so e6, I think this is what he wants. And what one of the problems may be is that, for one, you're not threatening d5. I think it would be a much nicer situation for you if you were threatening d5. No to Bene, 28 minutes for me, 32 for him. Now, normally, a month ago, I would have said, hey, buddy, that's fine, Julio. That's fine. The KGB, he'd be on us here. Because you've already spent so much time thinking about these. A lot of those decisions were intuitive. Now, were they interesting for us to talk about afterwards? Yes, and this is the appropriate time to talk about it. But during the game, the intuitive decisions have to come immediately. And a lot of the blunders that are going to happen have everything to do with you only having 28 minutes now. Okay, now it is appropriate for white to trade, because now his advantage is is structural. It's not just space. Knight d7. Now, maybe you should have played rook a8. I didn't like an f4. F4 is a frisky move. I think the guy should just be moving like knight f2. Frisky. And here I don't like this move. Julio, I don't like this move, buddy. Another structural weakness I don't think you need. And I was thinking about it. I was like, well, how come dude can't just go like this? Boom. And then if f5, boom, boom, boom. Isn't that good? Isn't that okay for us? Now, maybe it's frightening after f6, but honestly, he's just not ready for us. Not ready. So f5, I was like, I don't know. And then this is where you made me cry, Julio. You played here. Actually, that wasn't the move. It was this. That wasn't the move. It was that move. That was the move that made me cry. Up until here, you've played a really nice game. But this is the screamer here, because now the knight gets activated, and you've got some grief. As you pointed out, knight d6 also. The whole structure is much worse for you, and the bad king, especially in time pressure, it's not a friend of ours. It's not a friend. And then I assume he's winning after knight f3. Yeah, because bishop's got to move, which it doesn't, and we lost it. And bishop moves, and we lose the pawn on d5. So Julio, I thought that was a very interesting game. Lots of interesting King's Indian decisions. Kostya had his own game in Vegas, and I covered it. I was doing it live here. We were doing some live commentary, and I want to talk about that game too. A lot of times in these closed positions, you can get some very interesting positional decisions to make. Kostya says he wants to cover that himself. I might still do it. Kostya, if you're listening, buddy, I still might cover that game. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is Mitch. Now, the beginning times of Dojo, the beginning of the Dojo, me and Kostya were doing a lot of commentary for games that were played, over our Discord server, and Mitch was there, and I don't know who came up with, I think it was Kostya, and we came up with the phrase "to Mitch it," and "to Mitch it" meant that you had some nice position, and in the middle game, in the end game, then you just made a move very quickly, and lost it all, lost all your business, and so that's how the phrase came "to Mitch it." Now, in this particular game, I don't know how much time Mitch spent, but he definitely Mitches it. Okay, let me just share. We'll go back to the scene here. So we got Mitch is gonna Mitch. Of all the titles, of course, that was my favorite Mitch. Mitch is gonna Mitch. So let's go back here. All right, a little bit of history on this weird knight d2 move. There was a time in the 80s, for which I was alive, that this was kind of the rage. And I didn't understand this move until about why they did it until like 2 years ago. And even then it was kind of mystical. So the point, and I got it from Sarawan's book, I think it's called Chess Duels. And he's talking about a lot of these old time games. And the reason they were into knight d2 as opposed to knight c3 is that they were thinking that on knight c3, this move g6 would be a thing. And it's just some of the weirdest positions you've ever seen. They want to do gross things like bishop g7, knight h6, f6, and then knight f7. Why they thought this was a good thing, it's hard for me to understand. It's very hard for me to understand, but they did. I do know that as a fact, and that is my explanation for this weird knight d2 move. g6 is, of course, a strange move. And by the way, let's just say one of the cool things that Mr. Proust did here on our server is he talked about the move e5, and they did a practice tournament. I do think if you're looking for a way to crush the Caro e5 right now, it's a very fun and interesting way of doing it. All right, here we go. Knight d2, g6, c3, a little weird. Like, why wouldn't you just play knight f3, boss? But c3 is, I think, the reason why knight d2 back in the day, people were thinking was a better situation, because now you don't have to worry about the pawn on d4. Okay, so boom, boom, boom. And now Mitch plays a weird move, queen f3. By the way, I realize this would be time consuming for those doing notes, but it's very important. writing down how much time either on every move or on some of the moves is very important. It gives us a real indication of where you were thinking. And a lot of times, in fact, most of the times, when you think forever on a move, it usually is often not a good move. You end up doing something kind of weird. Like, I can imagine Mitch thinking for a while on Queen F3. It just feels like a move you were unsatisfied with. And he knows, and usually like something's gone wrong. You know, like you feel like something's gone wrong when you play Queen F3. And Mitch writes he's afraid of Bishop D3, something about G2. No one understands. But that's the reason he comes up with this move, Queen F3. So just for future reference, for myself and I think for you as well, if you write down some of the times, that would be helpful. And now we have to say all of Mitch's main advantage as a chess player, which is his incredible opening knowledge. He is an opening GM. Now that's all gone. Now we're just playing chess. This is against Countersparks, by the way, who's been with the dojo forever as well. And now, my friends, it's time for me to make a little announcement. I was talking to the people of the dojo, and let me just talk a little history about this show. It once started as a show, maybe it was like an hour long, and I was doing it for chess.com. And then there were a lot of people who wanted to do it, you know, who wanted to submit games. And then someone at chess.com was like, dude, make it a 3-hour show. And I was like, oh my gosh, do I have that much energy? And that's how it continued to then be a 3-hour show when I was doing it here with Chess Dojo. Now, going forward, though, what I think is more interesting for everybody involved is if I do shorter segments. I think it'll be and the idea is just a little bit of quality over quantity. So if I do a lot of games, it's hard, for example, for me to keep all of the games in my head. And also, they make cooler videos, like a shorter video that I could do maybe 15 minutes to 30 minutes long for, you know, YouTube. So going forward, the idea that me and the dojo have for this is that we will do a thing where people will subscribe. The people who are Patreon subscribers, like level 4, can submit a game, and they can submit it not just for me, but for Kostya and David as well. The only difference for me will be is that if you do submit it for me, I do require that you do extensive notes, and it's a longer game. Those are just simply the games that I want to cover personally, and I think that's just been my MO forever. David will cover a game. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. He'll look at anything. And I just feel like for my own sanity and for the respect of chess, I want to cover games that people have thought about, because I will think about these games. I enjoy thinking about them. And that, you know, you were able to have some time to think about it during the game as well. Okay, so we now get H5, totally strange move. And Mitch again is terrified of some weird stuff and could still play Bishop D3 and goes Fischer. He goes Fischer, Knight C5. Why am I saying Fischer? Because Fischer played this really weird thing back in the day where snip, snap, and then it was like Bishop F5, and then this terribly weird Knight C5 move, which just can't be good. So Mitch goes Fischer over here with Knight C5, and I'm sure Black could do all kinds of stuff. I don't understand Bishop E3. I guess I understand it because he wants to play C4, but I don't understand why we would want to play C4. So B6, Knight D3, Bishop G4, snip, snop, and the next several moves, I want you to play Bishop D2. I do not understand why you're giving him the bishop. And after Bishop D2, he would have to think about potential C4s. So Bishop E2, I don't like it. Knight D7, H3, I really don't like it. Bishop takes, knight takes, king takes would be kind of similar. And I think the guy should play knight takes e3. You then beg him to take the bishop. Boom, boom. Okay, so just for my my understanding of the position, I would say black is either a little bit better or clearly better in this position. Because it's not just that black has the bishop, but because we will get an open position. And that pain begins with e5. Okay. Let's try probably still some chessable theory. Knight e2. And I think castles is controversial from countersparks. I don't know why we're putting our king out of the business yet. You know, if we're going to castle, then castling long makes far more sense to me. And one of the problems that black is now going to have is in several positions he's going to be down a piece. So let's say, to me, castling is a mistake. I'm not really certain about knight b4 at all. I'm not certain about g4. And then I really don't like this move, knight d5. Mitch writes about c5. It makes a lot of sense. Black still seems to be better after c5. So after knight d5, let's talk about why this is a mistake. We're going to get a knight versus bishop ending. And white will now have a weakness, a tangible weakness that he can play against. And worst case scenario, he can even put a knight in here if he wants by simply playing de. And in those positions, he's not going to be worse anymore. Further, when you trade off that minor piece, it's going to be easier for the white king to feel safe in the center, right? There's less stuff that can get at him. So even here, Mitch could play king d2 if he wants to, right? And in a lot of respects, what we're going to see in coming positions is that Mitch is up a piece in the middle of the board where it counts. Okay, knight c1, ambitious. Good. Not a fan, because now the pawn on d5 is just completely on its lonesome. Good. Not a fan, just complete loss of tempo. And this gets at a little bit of some of the misunderstandings I feel that black has. So black is saying to himself, okay, I'm going to use g5 as a target. All right, I'm going to win that pawn. And I find like a lot of times in these positions, I had a student too recently, and he couldn't understand what else could be of value in the position except a weak pawn. When in fact, like you think about this position, we got to fix our rook on c8, our king on f8 needs to do something, you know, it's a critical moment, and getting the pawn to g5 doesn't really help that much. Okay, now Mitch makes maybe an inaccuracy, a5, and at the very least a5 is a good attempt to mess with white. All right, so now Mitch goes back to d3, and it's an interesting decision. This one, for the purposes of sanity, I kind of want him to take. Let's look at this. So he was worried about bishop d4. Let's say rook over. Let's say snip, snip. And I don't know where the guy's supposed to go. You can put it wherever you want to go. Let's put it on g7 just for kicks for a moment. We can talk about bishop c5 too. And then no, we can't. What are we talking about? What are we talking about, Cry? You got to protect e7. So bishop c5. Let's say king d3. Well, I want to say the obvious. Of course I like white. We could have done other things too, but of course I like white. The king is just much better. And we're going to start some business over there on the queen side. Now, Is Mitch still much better after 93? I don't know. It depends a lot what, if anything, black can do here. And the next couple moves don't inspire confidence from black. Good. Good. And now Mitch mitches it with knight takes d5. This one too, I want to say it's an easy one to Mitch. But on the other hand, black has one idea. He's had one idea ever since he played bishop h6 check, and that is to steal your pawn. Okay. So rook takes d5 is just winning outright. And now we're going to get this ending. Okay. Now, this is where Mitch mitches it for the second time. And first we're going to show the variation that he gives, which was knight f6, snip snop, king d7, d5, exclam. Good move. And this is a typical pawn endgame trick where black's king is not going to be able to get in, and we can force this through before any kind of drama with the g pawn happens. Okay. More importantly, though, with king e4, it's not clear that the king wants to go to e4, right? Not at all clear. So, king e4, king f4. Okay, so this is plausible, and I can imagine doing it myself, but the issue is that we have made our king passive, and our pawns, if we're going to win this game, are going to need the juice in the middle of the board. Okay, so obviously knight f6 is the correct move from a theoretical standpoint, but there's other things that we could have done here, including, like if we didn't see knight f6, like a4. All right, let's go on. Now Mitch says he mitches it again with a3. And the setup he wants, rather, is, let's look. Something like this. And this is pretty hard to do in a practical game. Let's just put it that way. So it's already gotten to the point where it's not easy. a3, though, we got to say it's just a weird move. It's just a weird move. Because when you think about it, what are we saying? We're saying we're afraid of b4? I don't understand. a3 doesn't even stop b4. Is it saying that you want to play b4 yourself? I don't know. Okay, a4. And now, if we're going to try to win this, it's going to get scary, right? All right, here we go. c4, check to the miserable king. And here, I feel like king f3 gives up all your chances to win this thing. Now, maybe you can't win it anyway on an objective level, but I think you could still have given him some business after king d5. For example, f4, king e4. Let's say bishop e2. We can talk about other moves too. Here, here, here. We are going to achieve c6. And all I know for certain is that if we achieve c6, we're going to be talking to him. We're going to be talking to him, you know? That's all I know. Whereas king f3, we don't have any juice. We just got the poor king out on its lonesome here. And the game concludes like this. And they make a draw a couple moves later. Okay. Let's move on to our friend Vishnu. Vishnu's been with me for years. Good old Vishnu. He just moved back to India after being in my area forever. I'm in Baltimore. He was in D.C. And I'm most mostly knew the guy online. I met him a couple times. He gave me Kasparov's Test of Time. It was one of the greatest books I ever got, part of my retirement portfolio, because the thing's worth $1 gazillion on eBay. Any case, I will continue to be friends with Mr. Vishnu, even if it's only on an online basis. Okay, Queen A5. Famous position. This used to be much more popular back in the day. And yeah, in my lifetime, this move that, let's say this is a great move to think about. So knight d2 was the move that people gave back in the day. We're talking like the 70s as like the way to play against the Cambridge Springs. And we're going to talk about what black does, but one of the interesting things, just to gauge how GMs feel about the position, is that I think even before the computers came around, computers love space and they love bishops, is the computers were like, before the computers, people were like, wait a second, here, tagging the bishop, that's one of the ideas of the Cambridge Springs. And you say, well, what if I just go back, bro? What's such a thing? And I think before people were very, very sensitive about the bishops, they saw this position and said to themselves, oh, that knight on c4, it's just so nice and beautiful. And black's piece is so cramped. But then, you know, you start looking at it like, well, what are you actually going to do, white, that's so special? And how are you going to prevent the eventual break out of the position that black will eventually achieve? This is not to say black's better, but just to say black is fine. And I think one of the key pre-computer games that changed people's thoughts were not only the Fischer games, with like the Fischer time on-off match, but in this position itself, where Kasparov against my sensei, Smyslov qualified for the candidates as an ancient dude. He was like 105 when he was playing Kasparov in this position. He played Queen A5 several times in the match, and Kasparov played Queen D2. Kasparov was the first to play the CD thing. Now, interestingly, before I go off on a tangent, this Queen D2 move, later we're going to see Vishnu play Queen D2, and I think it's because his subconscious knows about this different variation, and that's why he plays Queen D2. That's just a guess. In any case, one of the great games of bishop versus knight where Kasparov crushes my sensei in their candidates match from like 1983. I'm bad with dates, but I think it's 1983. Okay, back to the game. Vishnu's opponent plays bishop b4, probably playable. Rook c1, I'm sure queen c2 is playable. And now knight e4. These Cambridge Springs players, they're obsessed with getting the queen on a5 to talk to the bishop on g5. They got one idea. Okay, snip snop, bishop f4. Oh yeah, Vishnu was turned on the engine here. At one point he's like, oh, cry, I know I'm not supposed to, but I couldn't help it. I was getting low on time. What does that mean, I was getting low on time? He's like, what, you couldn't figure it out on your own, buddy, so you had to turn on the computer? Later, we're going to get some crazy computer lines that Vishnu gives us here. Bishop h4, I want to say, is a little bit more my speed, just because I don't want to get smacked with I don't want to get played with e5. Okay, but bishop f4, you're still doing fine. And black goes for it, queen a2. A little controversial. I think, well, let's just say it would have made more sense to do either castles or e5. Queen d2. And like I said, I think the subconscious reason is that other variation. Like, a lot of times these chessable freaks like Mitch and Vishnu, They'll study so many different opening lines that their heads start spinning and they don't think straight. Excuse me. And the problem is now when Vishnu plays queen d2, his knight is truly pinned forever, because even after you castle, your knight still can't move, right? So it gives added value for black to be taking the pawn on a2, because it means then that he doesn't have to worry about the knight ever doing anything, because there's no a3. Excuse me. Queen d2, queen a5, bishop e2, and now his opponent goes crazy. To my mind, e5 has to be the right move, or castles. e5 or castles, I don't know. It's probably it'll transpose. h5, madness. Okay, now is an interesting moment for Vishnu. Now, by the way, I think Vishnu talks a little bit later about how he's in time trouble, and this is definitely a moment for KGB, because this moment will also be an intuitive decision that you should make within 5 minutes. And let's say that for Vishnu, he's considering h4 and h3. Let's pause for a moment and talk about why h5 is controversial. You're down in time, right? And with h5, you are helping white open the position. And no, in general, no, not what you want to do. So one of the moves that I wish Vishnu would consider here would be f3. In fact, I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Let's presume he has to take. Maybe he doesn't. Let's just presume for a second. Let's say he castles. Let's say he castles. You're doing great, man. Doing great. That pawn on h5 has no idea why it's there. Our center is beautiful, and he's got a whole development problem to answer. Anytime he plays e5, we're just backing it up. We're okay. And of course, the idea of h5 was that you were going to pound me with the, yeah, but my f3 solves that problem as well. So again, I don't use the computer. I have no idea, Vishnu. You could check it with a computer if you like. I'm just giving you, and everybody else, my human understanding of why f3 and this position, and h5 is, asking for it, begging for it. Okay, we can't just castle, or at least it would be very controversial, because g5, bishop g3, h4. All right. h4 came, e5, and now definitely a strange move, g6. Let's just call it unnecessary. Queen c2, okay. And now I feel like black loses his mind. He just completely loses his mind. What the guy should do, it's not what he does. He gives away his dark square bishop, gasp. Opens the center more, gasp, and then plays rook e8. So, by the way, Vishnu, in your notes, I think you should pay more heed to his mistakes here. They are definitely, did he have some questions to answer? Yes, but you have just gotten some gifts, my friend. Some gifts that you don't want to turn a blind eye to. We should at least write about them a little bit. And one of the reasons I even thought of that Kasparov-Smyslov game is in that game too, it was this bishop. Holy moly, that's a strong bishop. Maybe that's how the London was even invented, after that Kasparov-Smyslov game. Just the dream of that bishop. What a beautiful thing. Guarding the white king, there's no counterplay against the white king. And then, of course, after g6, it's like, oh, buddy, those dark squares are just a wreck. So, on a practical level, I would say this game is probably only clearly better for white, but I think KGB might say this is over. KGB might be like, no, boss, this is all the way gone. In any case, we've got a decision here for Vishnu. And in a way, it's very simple. you can play rook a1, rook b1, or you can play f3. If you wanted to get fancy, you could play c5. I'm sure that's also possible. Seems unnecessary, though, to move the pawns. But if we just isolate it between going rook a1, b1, or in playing f3, then the answer as to whether we should play f3 or not is simply, can black use the e4 square? If he can, then no to f3. If he can't, then f3 sure. And nota bene, that's what do we got? We have a French structure, and that is exactly the French question about playing f6 with reverse colors. Can you win the e4 square? And in the game, Vishnu does not. So that's our problem. And like I said, I think a lot of this is time pressure stuff. And already it's difficult. Now here's the thing about using the computer. Vishnu's computer found the following amazing variation that no human could possibly ever see. I don't even think Fabi, okay? And where would you have to find it, by the way? You would have to find it in this position before you played f3 in order to justify the following thing. Why? Because it's the only way to make sense of this f3 thing. All right, let's show the computer thing that no Fabi even could find. Looks terrible for white, but oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And that's so hilarious when someone gives a computer variation, right? Because Vishnu's like, it wins. Bishop e5, that wins. It's a beautiful variation. It's just not very human. What's nice about it is our unopposed bishop, you know, that's our dog, and he gets to spank black here. Okay, so here we go. In the game, Vishnu plays bishop e5, and here's the thing about bishop e5 is I'm sure Vishnu did not appreciate that this was going to be such a big deal, but when we understand the aspect of the game where we say, oh right, that's his asset, that's my asset, the bishop on g3, then oh, you just can't give it up, bro. And that's a sad move, yeah. Now I guess we're either clearly worse or lost. I guess I'm going to say lost. Yeah. And Vishnu doesn't actually lose this game. Could the kid have played a little bit better? Probably. There are things here that no one understands. We'll just say that for a second. Here, Vishnu's computer wants him to play g4. In the game, he plays the human queen b7. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a yard sale now. Chess Late is in the chat. He likes to yard sale it when we play Bughouse. And so you can see, Chess Late, you're not the only one that likes to yard sale it, buddy. We got some serious yard salings. Okay, now, one thing I have told many players is if they want to progress, it's the end game. And why? Because in positions like this, people don't get it. So let's look at what happens. Boom, boom, boom. Is this a winning position for black? Should be. Rook c4. No bueno. Why? Because in the rook endgame, my friend, you've got two pieces, and they both need to play. So instead of hunting this pawn, which is only if you take it, it's only going to enable this dude, you need to bring your dog. You need to bring your dog in. And dog is a very angry man. If he ever reaches it down here or somewhere, holy moly, that's it, buddy. That's it. Okay, so we're just going to watch white blow it here. No one knows. No one knows. Now, is Vishnu still worse? Yes. We're not even going to talk about king f6 too much. And then boom, and now we're okay. Now white's flirting with death here. And here, Kostya, I didn't almost call you Kostya. Vishnu, I called you Kostya. You played rook e6. You might even be thinking, I don't know, there might be some way to start playing for a win here, you know? Like rook c7, rook h4, king e6. He doesn't deserve anything. Now here I'm going to yell at you a little bit, buddy. You need to play rook h7 here. Then it's just an easy draw. And now you muck it up a little bit, buddy. You go back and forth and no one knows why. You offer to draw here. Okay. I don't understand. I don't understand any of it. So we're just going to cruise through here. Okay. Vishnu, good game, buddy. I hope you have a great time in India. It seems like it's going to be great. Someday, I'm going to go visit you and Shagar Shah and all the rest of them and play some tournaments there and get wiped out by little Indian kids. It's okay. I'm old enough, dude. I've lost. And by the way, if you feel like I'm making fun of you when you do this game analysis, let me just say, I stunk it up in my last tournament, dude. And I'm going over my games right now. It's not an easy process, but I'm doing it. And it's part of the business, is just acknowledging where you've blown it. Okay, here we go. Let's go on to Door. Maybe take a quick look over here. And Door needs to cowboy up. That's right, man. And this is an over-the-board game in the, I think it's an Israeli league. So here we go. I did not forget to go back and change the scene. Progress. All right, so first things first, let's flip the board so we can see it from Door's perspective. Fine. Now, let me just say, my intuition here is that you should play b5 and bishop b7 immediately. Why? Because later, if you're going to put the bishop there, then the knight on c6 will be in the way of it. So it would be nice just to start with that. And it creates a threat immediately for b4. So here we go. Boom, boom, boom. And now we've transposed to a g3 Sicilian Scheveningen. Now, this is not a bad move, but in a lot of ways it contains the seeds of weirdness for what is to come. And the old school plan, which I like here, is to play bishop d7 and then get ready to snip and put the bishop on c6, after which you're mostly fine. Okay, queen 7, not bad. Still not bad. But here it gets really weird and you play rook d8. So, you know, bishop d7, and I'm sure you were afraid of g4. In fact, you write that. So let's just talk about it here. g4, snip, snop, bishop c6, g5, knight d7. You're okay. You're okay. There's nothing wrong here. You've got, he can't play f5, or at least it's dangerous because of this. You've got e5 coming to break it up if you need to. Yeah, totally typical Scheveningen position. I'd rather be black here, you know, to each his own. But still, I'd rather be black. And one of the key things about the Sicilian is if you're going to move that rook on f8, it's far more clever to put this guy on e8. And it looks weird at first, but the idea is there's a lot of opportunities for the rook to open up. And I don't know if Kasparov was the first, but it was in those matches in the 80s. I think it was, I can't remember the dates anymore, but like 84, there's a famous game. He plays rook e8. It's a novelty, and it's like, oh, right. Then after that, you got all the Scheveningen players playing rook e8. Now, just to say something about Scheveningen. Back in the days, Scheveningen was its own move order where you delayed a6. But of course, as a Najdorf player, you can play a6 and then e6, getting what we call a Scheveningen structure. And nowadays we talk about the Scheveningen structure because the Scheveningen itself got wiped out by the Keres attack. But it's still a structure, and that's what we're doing here. Okay. So let's go on. Rook d8, I do not like it. And one of the things about I played the Scheveningen for years. I didn't even realize at the time was that, first of all, the burden is on white to prove something here. He has more development, but this pawn is back, not doing anything in the center. And of course, black has an extra center pawn. So he has to use that extra time to do something, right? And in particular, what he has to understand is that this knight is dominated by these pawns. It's a terrible knight. And of course, this bishop isn't the hottest thing ever either, right? Imagine even if the bishop were on b3, we would still say it's not the hottest thing ever. And that's the advantage of having central pawns. They dominate our opponent's pieces. Okay, so anyways, I'm not going to go into it too much, but then there's several moves here where white plays uncreatively. Let's call it that. Boom. Little weird. I still want you to play bishop d7. And here what you're going to do is you're going to trade off your good bishop on d4. I'm not a fan door. And then here you play the weird knight b8. And like you said, you were probably intending queen c5. Now, if white does nothing special, as he does in the next couple moves, you're absolutely fine in this position. And one of the cool things that I don't think your opponent understood is that the reason you're fine, that black is fine, is because the knight on c3 is garbage and the bishop on g2 needs some kind of trick in order to open itself. This does not help white. And now rook d7, a little weird. A little weird. He's not threatening anything, boss. He's not threatening anything. Okay. Boom. Weird. Poor. c4. And you right, you could have played, I think you could have played knight a5, but you could have also done it now. And I think already after knight a5, you're doing great because you've got a simple plan of playing bishop c6, knight b7, c5. And also, as you write, the knight on a5, it just makes all of his pieces lifeless. King f8, e5. Controversial. Let's feel his pain, though. It's hard for him to do anything. And the other thing that's interesting we should have said is there's so many things, opportunities earlier in the game where white could have been more ambitious and done things like g4, g5. And what I was trying to get at, I probably didn't express clearly enough, is when I was playing the Scheveningen against, let's say, the 2200s, the 2300s, they wouldn't know what to do either, and they wouldn't be able to build in positions like this. And then they would play moves like e5. Then when I started playing some strong GMs with the Scheveningen, then they started ripping me up because they had they found ideas that were creative, you know, and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, I'm dying here, I'm dying. All right, here we go. For the life, it just makes me want to cry. Okay. All right, now we get this position. And say, no way should Dor be worse in this position. No way. He ends up losing this game, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. King f2, bishop e4 immediately. I don't like it. Why? Because that white's knight wants to go really to either d4 or c1 anyway. It's going to have to. So there's no rush in doing this. Okay, but and it's going to help the white king in its advance. What in general do I want you to do, Dor? I want you to play f6, buddy. I want you to play f6. Now, we're going to see more than one opportunity for you to do it. Weird. Now you can't play f6 because of knight d4. And now you can, buddy. This is where you got to play f6, man. Weird. Knight c1 is a spicy move. Let's just say most players would have played knight d4. a5. I like it. So here the guy played a couple moves at least where he's giving you some business, and we should say a5 is a nice move and that you should play a5 yourself, not just to protect the pawn, but also on the principle that your pawns belong on the opposite color of your bishop. And now you blunder it in an interesting way, very interesting endgame with king c5. What do I want you to do? You can probably guess that it is f6. So let's just put this on the board for a second. It's still pretty dynamic, but in general, the bishop wants positions that are open and loose and with passed pawns rolling. And that's the kind of flavor of position that we're going to get after f6. It's true that the pawn on c4 is a connected passed pawn, and I'm sure that was his rationale for playing the way he did. But, you know, we're trying to get a pawn, obviously, on e5 ourselves. Yeah, interesting position. And you could put this in a book, honestly, with knight d3. But one of the key things, Thor, I'm sure you just missed it, understandable, is you don't want to give your opponent, in general, a chance to go into a pawn endgame, because he's the one who gets to decide. And now it's this really hardcore business of, are you losing or not? And these things are not easy to figure out. They are some of the most complicated positions on the planet. Okay, let's presume that h5 is correct. Let's just give it the benefit of the doubt. And now we're going to see how f6, the now f6 loses, and your opponent plays a great move. Snip, snop, g4, end of the game. Now, was it actually losing? I don't think so. I think what you can do is you can, is it true? I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe it is losing. It's a very hard business, honestly. Like, let's just imagine king c6. Now, if king f4, king c5, king g5, king d4, I'm going to say we're okay. If king d4, I think we can try that. No, don't do it, buddy. Don't do it. He's still going to EFG for you. So this gives me a heart attack too. So, looks lost after h5. And it's hard then to start seeing how we're not losing here. Connected passed pawn, and the fact that this e5 pawn is actually a strength. By the way, Dor, I think one thing that I'm going to guess you were doing, this might have been partly subconscious, is that you were telling yourself a story from early on that the pawn on e5 was a weakness, and that's why you weren't playing f6 in those earlier positions. But as you, it's obvious now, I guess. But as you can see here, it's not. It's a great thing, which is helping white create that outside passed pawn. So my intuition, anyways, is that this kind of thing is probably bad news for you here, because f5 he'll play g5 and e5 will give you weaknesses. Not necessarily. Yeah, it looks bad. It looks bad. Because he can force open this square with a g5. You could still analyze it. There might be some little hopes, but it's definitely pretty rough. Okay, I'm taking forever, and we haven't even got to gains yet. Chess gains. Which game? Whose gains? Chess gains. I got to meet Chess gains at the at this Cherry Blossom tournament where he was playing, so that's kind of cool. And Chess Gains has been playing my opening repertoire for black. I recommended e5 here, but it's kind of a similar thing because white could play knight e2 anyway. And this knight e2 system, let's call it a modest approach for white, is something that I think a lot of players do against the perk opening as well. So like black could play g6 here. Also after chess gains plays e5, he could still transpose to g6. Anyways, the story I want to tell there is I had an epic blitz match back when I had my chess blitz disease on my quest to 2700. And I had a blitz match against, oh man, it's a long day. I better take a drink of water because I don't remember the guy's name. GM Naxons. And GM Naxons from Latvia wasted me with this knight GE2 move, and it put me on total tilt. And it was an example of an opening winning a blitz match. In any case, so G3, and black can do many things. And I'm just, for the record, Gaines, I'm gonna just tell you what I think is the objectively best. What you did was fine, but the objectively best, I think, is G6, castles, castles. And now they like to play H3 so they can play bishop E3, right? And I think a cool strategy here is make them play F3. And once you make them play F3 with that silly G3 pawn over there, then you just tell yourself softly in your heart, you say, you know what, I'm doing fine here. I'm just doing fine. And I think that's true. Okay, like I said though, Chess Games, what you did was not wrong. And I like that you mostly followed a setup that I recommended for a different white approach. Okay, and he's used too much time with 60 because they started with 90. Okay, F4, controversial. The problem with F4, it seems right at the surface, but the problem with F4 is you never really want to take on E5 ever in this opening. One of the great things about the setup is that anytime white breaks the tension, it frees both the knight on D7 and the bishop on E7. So bishop E7, bishop E3. Weird because you're allowing knight G4, right? Castles. Bishop F3. We could talk forever about knight G4, but let's just say bishop F3, Chess Gains. That isn't right. That isn't right. Now, this is my little message to Chess Gains here. Oh, okay. Chess Gains is saying the 60 was just how much he spent on the move. So 1 minute. For the notes, it would be helpful to know the total time. Actually, and I think on the next one, he's saying he's more than 90 minutes, which means he hasn't spent any time at all, which might be a bad thing. Oh, Mitch, we definitely talked about you while you were away, buddy. We were talking hard about you, bud. I'm sorry about that. You got back from the doctor? Well, I'll tell you what, Mitch, you're going to go to the doctor when you watch the VOD, buddy. You're going to be talking to the doctor when you watch the VOD. Okay. So, let me give some tough love to our good friend Chess Gains, who had a great tournament here. One thing I've seen in your games is, and this is partly the fault or the benefit of my endgame repertoire that you've been following, is you get a rich struggle like the one you have here, and you don't sense when your opponents do weird things, which they definitely do. Okay, and then you lose it in the positional struggle. And I think right here, what you got to say when you see bishop F3 is you just got to see it and you're like, no, that isn't right, bro. No, that isn't right. Yeah. So Chess Gains tanks here forever and plays H6. Like we said, like KGB says, you think forever on a move, it usually isn't a good sign. Now, should Chess Gains have played B5 in under a minute? Probably, at least in under 4 minutes. What is he terrified of? He's terrified of G4. I don't know about G4, man. I don't know if he's ready if White is ready for that kind of thing. Let's say what's weird about bishop f3. First of all, if you were going to play for g4, why aren't you playing h3? I guess you have a dream of stopping knight h5. Is knight h, like after g4, g5, he's already thinking, oh, I'm going to prevent knight h5. That's some abstract stuff, because A, I'm not sure the knight is so special on h5, and B, bro, when you played bishop f3, you blocked off your rook, which you're going to need, man. Now h6, I think me and KGB, buddy, we're just going to say that's a weird move. I don't get it. Maybe I do get it. You're trying to like stop g4, g5, but not, you don't need to. You don't need to. Because f5, if your opponent ever does it, will be highly controversial. All right, now let's look at what you were scared of with b5. Now, I don't think you have to be cold-blooded to play b5. I think you just got to play b5. I think you just got to play b5, boss. Okay, so you were concerned about g4. Now, b4 is not something to be concerned of because you got knight b6 coming. And knight b6, once you land that dog on c4, it's just going to be yapping. That dog will just be yapping. Okay, so let's concern ourselves with g4. And here you write that b4 would be, you know, your main alternative. I'm not sure it is. Now, one thing we got to say about this is a positional decision is that when you play b4, you lose control over the c4 square and also like your ability to outpost there. Let's think about g4. Actually, it's funny because in Dor's game, we had a very similar thing where Dor was terrified of g4, g5, and it wasn't that big of a thing. So I think just this first glance, non-computer, whatever you want to call it, is knight b6 seems like a good move to me. If he takes forever on e5, by forever I just mean a bunch of times, he's not doing himself a service. And maybe the trick is to see that we're not worried about this. Is that the trick we need to see? Maybe that's the trick we need to see. In any case, we're not worried about this at all. Yeah, no concern. No concern of ours. Fe knight d7 all day long. We will win that pawn back. We will be better. And if he plays g5, well, then we calmly play knight d7. And anytime he moves this pawn, this pawn's going to be hanging. And we've got knight c4 on the table. We've got things like c5 on the table. We're doing great, man. We're doing great. And the b4 move we can do whenever we like. You know? So yeah, I think this position's great for you, buddy. I think you're doing absolutely great. And white is the one, you know, long term in these positions, white's the one that it can get a little hokey. I'm talking DM hokey. That was a bad joke. I'm sorry, DM hokey. All right, so h6, we got to just recognize in your soul that's a weird move. Okay, rook b1, is that a weird move? Yeah, yes it is. b5, thank you very much. b4, weird, man. And now you played rook e8, okay, but look, you can still do this knight b6 thing. And I'm assuming you just assume that this was, I'm assuming that you assumed that this was toast for you, but I think you're doing great. I mean, now you're doing more than great, because look at that. What a cherry. What a cherry up there. Okay, rook e8. Now, rook e8 in itself, not bad. Snip. I like this comment. Man, the dude loved to think. Another 21 minutes, and he finally decided to clarify things on the queen side. So one of the funny things is this doesn't clarify, because he doesn't know which way you're going to recapture. Boom. And you decide CB. Let me just say I like AB better. And I think in general it's the better move, but definitely now because both moves free one of your pieces. And let's just say AB's got to be given a question mark simply for that reason. I don't know what the guy should do, by the way. I don't. One of the cool things for him maybe with AB is you're now going to give him some information, and after you give him the information, maybe then he'll finally come up with an idea of what it is he's supposed to do. Oh, thank you for rating, you guys. All right. So, in this position, the guy asks, he's just like, maybe you come up with some information, you give him some information with CB. Why do I like AB? Both moves free a piece. CB frees the bishop, AB frees the rook. But AB contains the knight on C3 completely. Okay, do I still like your position here? I do. I think it's great, buddy. Queen D3, kind of weird. He's planless here. He's planless. Queen C7 makes a lot of sense, followed by knight B6. Queen C7 followed by knight B6, but okay, rook C8. G4. Now, let's just say you're saying this move is putting you on high alert, but I don't know, man. I think he's putting himself on high alert. He just put his king on H1 where your bishop's on B7. Does he really want to pop things open over there? I don't know, man. I don't know, dude. I don't know. Okay, so here you played ED. A lot of intuitions besides ED. ED's got to be fine, but knight B6. Actually, knight B6 is now not playable since you played bishop F8. Right? So you needed the bishop to talk to the D8. You could have played Queen C7. Queen C7 is not as happy as it once was because before, when you played, the bishop would be talking to the pawn on G5. Let's give your move a chance here. I'm just looking at something truly bizarre. This probably is just going to land me in chess dojo trouble, but let me just ask, could you have thought about, D5 is definitely playable. Is that a move, man? Maybe these are the questions I shouldn't be asking. These might be the questions we shouldn't be asking, but let's just look. Boom, 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 boom. These are probably the questions I shouldn't be asking. Knight takes. Queen takes D8, and then I'm going to play bishop takes E4 check. Pawn takes. Rook takes. These might be the questions I shouldn't be asking. These might be the questions I shouldn't be asking. It's looking kind of interesting, though, Chess Games. I gotta say, buddy. This is looking kind of interesting. Let's check ourselves here. Now, one of the reasons I want to bring this up is this is definitely a move A to have considered during the game, but definitely in the notes, because he's pushed his luck all the way here. He's pushed his position, and he's ready to get popped in the face, dude. Look at all this stuff. Look at all this stuff. And besides your H6 move, everything kind of makes sense. So boom, D5, man. Wow. I think it's going to be a similar story here. Let's just look. Snippos, tippos. Now, arguably, you would even have compensation with knight d5, but let's look at the main event here, which is boom. Beautiful position, man. Lovely, lovely story. And I'm going to guess that that's winning here. Ooh, baby. Oh, yeah. Taste me. Taste it. Did I miss something? It wouldn't surprise me if I missed something. Bishop b7 here. Maybe I did miss it. Uh-oh. Come on, Cry. Pull it together, man. Look at that, Cry. You missing that? You missing that, buddy? All that love, and I didn't need. I'm down 2 pieces. No good. No good. That chess games might have just destroyed all my joy. Not the first time. Just bishop b7. Chess is sometimes, darn Maybe you ruined all my joy. In any case, what we got to say is back here, I think you're doing great. And obviously D5 is something you would have to really calculate. But in general, I still believe in your position, Queen C7, that kind of stuff. So let's just see what you wrote here with Queen C7. Yeah, G5, boom, boom. I don't believe in his position here, man. Like, you wrote Knight H7, but here is a nice move. That's just nice. He's got to play Bishop D4, and then you can play Knight H7 followed by Knight E5. You're doing great. It's turned into a Scheveningen structure. And everything is going your way. Everything. With B4 making no sense. And, let's just mention, holy moly, the Sicilian dream. All right. You guys, I'm taking too long on these beautiful games. Now it's getting wanky. Now it's getting funky. Could he have just taken on D6 and been happy? Probably. There's a lot of things I don't understand. We can just guess that this is some good time trouble here. So he's got 8 minutes left. His opponent's got 8 minutes. And here we got to say that his opponent's doing great. There's just no other ways about it. What does he do with his position, though? He's taking his beautiful tempos and playing H3. Why, bro? Why would you do it to yourself? The first move that should be coming to his opponent's mind is Knight G3. What a beautiful position. There's still some questions. But okay, here we go. H3. Weird. Okay. I had some thoughts on this. What was I thinking here? I had some very evolved thoughts, chess games, but now I'm forgetting. Okay. Where were my highly evolved thoughts? Where did they go? I didn't write them down. Now it's all over. Yeah, in this position, these are my highly evolved thoughts. Dude could have played, I think, snip with the claim that if he takes back this way, Knight H4 looks like a nice position to me. Definitely. If you take with a pawn, then again, some knight move, probably this one. Knight D2 also comes to mind. And gotta like white, I think. Maybe Knight D2 might be more sensible. But in any case, both these moves, I like white's position. So he does this to himself. We get this big trade. Is it a draw? Yeah, it's a draw. Good move. Good move. And A5's weird. A5's just weird. Okay, let's look. Boom. And you write about A6 here, which is certainly very scary. But let's look. A6, and you write about rook takes C3, but I think you're still holding on here, right? Maybe not. Well, I don't know. I can't. It's not immediately evident either way. You know. It looks like you're still holding it to me. Am I missing something? Anyways, these guys are low on time. I think Chess Gains is holding this. I did spend a little bit of time on this ending because it just seemed like maybe white could work some magic, but I couldn't make anything work. Rook A3, good. And they tittle-tattle around a little bit. And I tried to find ways for white to win. I couldn't do it. So we get a draw. Okay. Now, this is Kimaga, also known as Simon Christensen. I think the dude is from Denmark. I think. And oh man, Denmark. Party scene in Denmark right now, my friends. They are going crazy over there. Scenes. There's scenes in Denmark, man. Scenes in Denmark. All right, here we go. You guys are going to get my cherry-flavored ASMR lozenge here for a second. Okay. Now, very typical opening, and big questions about how black should proceed. I'm no opening specialist. Probably the easiest way for black would be to play DC followed by C5. He, though, does a move which puts Simon maybe on tilt. And it's just this interesting question. When I did I just showed this other scene here. When I did my little chapter overview, I say Kimaga grabs a pawn. I don't think he's wrong to grab the pawn, but I do think it kind of sets the stage for what we get in this very interesting game. He might. It just in the notes, it felt maybe like Kimaga was like, no, you can't play chess like that with b6. And when I looked at it, I was like, well, this might be a good example of compensation. So let's take a look. Snip, snop, rook e8, bishop h4, c5. Now, black had other moves too, such as, but let's just stick with c5. So here's the question. Does black have compensation? And now just my first glance instinct is no, black does not, but I've been in enough of these situations where black proved compensation so that I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it's going to be close. So, for example, bishop b5 is a move, maybe it's great, but at the least then white will lose the light squares and black will pitter-patter around them. Is it enough? I don't know. I do know that these Grunfeld people love to do it. Queen b3, maybe that's better. I again kind of think there's light square issues after, say, bishop b7. Yeah. Okay, so interesting question. Simon's move isn't bad. Very human. Castles. Snip, snop. I'm not sure about the snip, snop. I think white shouldn't do the snip, snop until he's forced to do the snip, snop. It gives white a lot of information. Bishop b7. And now, Simon, here's an interesting thing. You start getting this knight takes d4 thing starts going psychological on you. It's not there, buddy. He's not ready for any kind of knight takes d4. And so what you do in the next couple moves is you compromise your position in order to deal with him. I think this position, now I think this is winning. And you write a queen b3 in your notes, that's my first instinct, yeah. Queen b3 for sure. One reason I feel confident about your position is, for one, I don't think black should actually be dreaming about playing against your king. I think that's actually wrong because you've got more pawns over there, and yeah, I don't see a way through for the guy. That beautiful bishop on h4 is going to be a guard of the king as well. More typical would be black creating some kind of play on the queen side. So if I was black, I would be more interested in moves like bishop f5, probably play knight a5, put a rook on c8, try to talk to the light squares over there. And, he can make a claim that you got to do something with that pawn. And if you move the pawn, then my knight will start talking to these squares. That's the kind of thing these players think about. The fiddlers of the world. Like, does black have compensation here? Well, at the very least, he's got a little bit. Yeah. It seems obscene, I'm sure. I'm sure it seems unfair. It would seem unfair if he has compensation. But definitely on a practical level, yeah, he does. He can start wiggling in here. And the point is not so much to do this kind of business, but to control these key squares. So he wants this square, this one, this one, this one. And definitely the big fat C file. Okay, so here, anyways, what am I saying? I think this is misguided, but he does throw you for a loop. I don't understand any of that with this G5. I don't get it. Now, he is also obsessed with the king side. Knight e1, not really necessary. Bishop f3, g4, terrible move. Terrible because now he's giving you all those dark squares. What should you do? Just play bishop e2. But why do you take? Because you're terrified of some kind of g2 thing. And that terror is actually going to make things worse. Because, why would we ever take that thing on c6? And this leads to them, in this move, bishop a4. Okay, clearly a move we miss. Now, this is one of the things where you shouldn't feel horrendous about missing bishop a4, but you should feel horrendous about giving the light squares away. That was the positional mistake that led to this little light square disaster over here. Okay, but still, interesting question. Namely, are you still better? My gut instinct says you're at least fine here. Let's look. Boom, boom, boom. Now, correct. What I like about rook takes d1 is in these positions where you are up the exchange, we've talked about this a lot on our past shows, you do not want to exchange one of black's rooks. You need to keep one of your rooks. And if you put the rook on c1, the guy can just play rook c8 whenever he wants and bully you off to c5 because he should not take. We've talked at length about why he shouldn't take, but diversity. Diversity of forces is good. And the black's rooks are not diverse. They do the same thing. All right, rook c8, queen e2. Now, this is weird because you're setting yourself up for some kind of business with with bishop takes d4, right? I love your position here, honestly. I don't know what the computer would say, but I like it. And you've got several ideas here. Knight b4 intending d5, knight c6 looks great to me. I love it. And the massage beginning with knight f4, I kind of like. I'm partial to that too. Your king is just better. Like one idea of knight f4 is just like, well, I'm just going to play h3 next move to fix the king and also to damage your structure, buddy. And then I'm just going to work it. And very dangerous for black. Okay, queen e2, queen f5. And then this is horrible that you're giving him the light squares. So one of the things about this game that we got to say is it was giving up the light squares that was really the sadness behind all of this. Now, this guy's about to blow it. So we're just going to admire his blowing it. And that was a very resourceful way to draw. And there's some endgame studies that end in precisely that repetition as well. Okay, I'm not sure about the ratings of these two. I'm going to say somewhere between 1900 and 2000. I need to play Elo Guesser. I've never played Elo Guesser, but I'm looking to play Elo Guesser. All right, you guys, talk about Elo Guesser. Here's one for you. This dude, first time on this show, named Joe. Okay, now check this out. 60-30 over the board game. He and his opponent are unrated. Unrated. Now, back in the day, you playing somebody unrated in a tournament, you're just going to walk into that thing and be like, all right, well, we'll go to lunch early. We're going to lunch early. Buddy, you ain't going to lunch early if you're playing Joe, I'll tell you that. Holy moly, man. Or his opponent. It's like Joe in this game, he's a very angry man, and it's like he's just read The Art of Attack by Vukovic, man. He's just going to come out here and start throwing blows. And let me show a couple notes I thought were really interesting about what Joe is doing here. I think it actually helps to show why using the computer is sometimes wrong, too. So we've seen this before, 1,000 times. And Joe plays now a move that is unconventional. Plays bishop d3. All right. So let's read what he writes. The bishop appears to me to be more valuable on d3, as eventually I will get to play e5 and open the bishop up to the king's side. While it looks like the g6 and h7 pawns will block the bishop, I should be able to contend with this with h4, h5. And there are no lines where knight e4 seems to work, so you get an extra defender on e4. He wrote d4, I'm sure he means e4. Okay, so really interesting, because if you look at a database, bishop e2, and bishop d3 will not be among the top moves. Now, is bishop d3 a terrible move? It's probably not great, but is it terrible? I don't know. I'll give the conventional understanding, what I think is the conventional understanding as to why bishop d3 is wrong. Because you're hitting a rock, and really because your queen wants access to d4. Now, Kostya is a big expert on the King's Indian and probably has some file on bishop d3, but my off-the-cuff variation would be something like bishop g4, knight c6, e5, and knight d4. And black is, I don't know, some people might say black is better, but I'm going to just go ahead and say equal. Okay. Like I said, Kostya might have a fancier variation. But, now, is it that big of a difference to bishop e2? No, probably not. And one of the cool things is when you don't know theory and you're just playing moves that seem correct, well, your opponent doesn't know what to do then, especially if they've just memorized 3,000 lines on Chessable. I don't think bishop d3 might not be on the Chessable course, my friend. Okay. Yeah, Joe's about to get crazy. Here we go. h3. Oh, wait, excuse me. Here we go. Knight e7, bishop g5. In general, not what you want to do, but okay. c5. Now, what's interesting about c5 is I think now the bishop on d3 is going to be more useful than it would be otherwise, and that e5 would give white more grief. Good move, d5. And already, I think white's doing great. So c5, an interesting mistake. I've talked at length about Gelfand's book on positional play, but there's a very similar one here where to this structure where he talks about, and already the space advantage looks pretty good for white. Not convinced by knight g4. And look at this. Now, here's the beginning, my friends. Here's the beginning. All right, so obviously the guy wants to play knight e5. And notice that with Joe, dude, he's been thinking about h4, h5 ever since he put the bishop on d3. And Joe is I'm telling you, man, Joe is a very angry man. Check out what he does. Bam! Holy moly, man. All right, h5. Bam! All right, here we go. Knight e5. Now, the positional way to have played this would have been to not trade anything. And let's say something like this. Bishop e2, knight d2. No trades for you, buddy. And we're going to start knocking your knights around like misfits, right? That's the other disadvantage of bishop d3. It can get popped in a number of variations. Okay, but here we go. You can take, he's just saying, you can take my bishop. He should take his bishop. And now Black does a big mistake. Let's say some obvious things about the position. We're attacking on both wings, and the power of the initiative is going to be what's important. And with Black's next move, he really forfeits his right to attack on the queen side by playing a5. I did not plan it this way, but we had an earlier game with Julio, right at the very beginning. Was it Julio? Oh, dude, am I getting it correct? Yeah, it was with Julio's game, where a5 was played as a mistake. And here, the main problem is by losing control over the b5 square, Black won't be able to open the position. And you've got to open the position to the white king here, because it's going to be a question of time. Who gets there first? And whoever gets there first, it's going to be really insane. I think Black is doing great here after a6, and I don't care what white does. We're playing b5 next move, and we're ripping it all open, right? We're ripping it all open. Okay, so we're about to find out that Joe is a very angry man. Here it comes. Rook g1. One of the things about Rook d1, I've seen this in a number of games. So you play Rook dg1, you are a true romantic, because you're saying, bro, my Rook on h1 will come to life. And it's true, especially after a5. I don't know where Black's play is coming from. That's not going to help you, boss. g4, I loved it. I love it. Look at Joe, man. You guys get ready for Joe. Just get ready for Joe, man. Here he comes. Whack. Whack, baby. Whack. Ooh. Oh, buddy. Oh, man. Now, I just want to stress, my friends, I have no idea if e5 works, but what a move, man. What a move. You know, I'm telling you, imagine you're playing some unrated guy in a tournament, and he busts out e5 on you. He's just sacked the exchange, and he's just coming for you, man. Whack. Taste me. Here he comes, bro. Here he comes. Black can do so many different things here. He can take on e5, take on h5. He could play f5. Not really possible to calculate it all out. Okay, let's just enjoy. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Boom. Can you guys just confirm with me that we're seeing something special? Bishop f6. Now, do I know if bishop f6 is correct? I don't know, but it sure looks like a hell of a chess move to me, man. That's a hell of a move, boss. Dang, look at that move. Snip, snip. Oh, man. Rook f7. Thank you for the piece back. And now we go check to the miserable king. And now Joe just forgot that he could play queen h3 here, after which he's winning. And honestly, we look at the position, like, I'm going to guess, this is just a guess, that knight e4 is also winning. Just because our force count on the king side is so amazing over there. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Joe, you were killing this guy, man. So, I mean, like I said, I don't know if those are correct, but I do want to say, like, I've seen a lot of players who were attacking, and they were attacking in an unfounded way, and it just like immediately smelled wrong. Your moves, they look right, dude. I don't think they're actually right, but they look right. And when I say they're not actually right, that doesn't mean anything. A lot of Tal's moves weren't right either. Boss, but let's just consider some of your moves, buddy. You're understanding correctly that you got to punch him in the nose. Punch him. And then this move, boss. Bam! And this is what I mean, whether it's right or wrong, it's the move you want to make. The queen wants access to g6. The knight on c3 wants access to e4. Bam! Whether you missed it or not, you're still doing interesting things here. And that's just a hell of a move, man. It really is. Yeah. Like I said, I think you're probably lost here, but that's not the point of the exercise right now for me. This is just amazing. And now you're winning. Now you're winning, yeah. Okay, beautiful game, my friends. Let's go on to the next one. I gotta start moving it. I'm taking too long over here. This is Thor, and I think the title of my business here was Thor's Endgame Sadness. We're gonna get some terrible moves here, my friends. I'm sorry, Thor, buddy. It's also his opponent. We're gonna get some miserables here. Les Miserables. Les Miserables coming up, my friends. All right. Let's flip it so we can see Thor. Beautiful opening from white. Now, if you want to mess with the dude, play this against the Smith-Morra. I did this way back in the day, actually, as black. And it's very possible for white to go wrong now, as he now does. Let's just show the main trick. If you play this, you'll get the following variation in all your games. By the way, knight d4 is the threat. It's a brutal threat. Rook d1, bishop c5, sorry, my friend. And it's already gone wrong, because not only at this threat, we got this one. Okay, knight b5 doesn't really help white. Doesn't really help. This knight is a beautiful knight. And kick. And up to here, black has played, I don't know, we want to call it a perfect game, something like that. White still has some marginal compensation, but I definitely believe in black. b5 makes sense. Knight c6 makes sense. The problem with bishop c5 is you're kind of outside of the chain. What I mean chain is you're going to want to play d6 anyway. Now, king h1 was also moved. And knight a4. Now, knight a4 I really despise because the knight is offsides over there. And so one of the things I want to stress is black has played a very interesting and involved opening system that if I was just going to put ratings on it, I'd be like, oh, boss, you got to be 2200 to even know about that kind of jam, you know? That's some involved stuff. And the reason I'm making fun of you is later we're going to see some endgame moves that are just like, oh, we're going to go from 2300. We're going to have to dial that number down, buddy. We're going to have to dial it down. And, you know, I'm making fun of you in a way that I hope is constructive, honestly, because you're not the only one who has endgame problems. Okay, by the way, I think a very interesting move here for white would be knight d5 with the intention, I don't even know if this works, but the intention would be here, here. That's not a good move, Cry. I'm sorry I even mentioned it. But it's definitely not knight a4. It's not knight a4 that he wants to do. Okay. Now, here, we're going to get spicy. Bishop d7, bishop e5, bishop b5 exclam, d5. Okay, I'm going to say you are winning this position, okay? Winning, because your unopposed bishop on a7, after he exchanged the bishop on f4, amazing. And those pawns that appear doubled, they are incredibly strong in the center. So, and his knight on a4 owes you things. So, knight c3, okay, let's just say you are winning this position, and all you need to do is to play a move like bishop d4 or bishop c6, rook d8. Now, it's not so easy. Are you still better? I think so. But he goes snip, snip. He gets to take your business. And one of the reasons I want to stress that you've committed a crime here is now you have given your opponent both the opposite color bishops and also the potential for initiative, i.e. the guy could play rook c7 right now. And I don't know the evaluation of that position, but it's not an easy life for us, and by us I mean black. So we go back here. Oh, dude, you're in control. You're in control here. Look at this move, bishop c6. What is he supposed to do after that? Or bishop d4. What is he supposed to do after that? Nothing. Nothing, honey. He can give it up. It's all over. Okay. So, one of the strangest moves that anyone's ever seen. a3, no one understands. It's so bizarre. Let me just say, as somebody who's watched a student, I was going to call myself a student of the game, but that's too lofty. Someone who watched a lot of chess. It's just so strange to me that somebody could play a3 here. I got to work hard. I got to work hard to understand a3. Let me just say a couple things about the dynamic of this position. Okay. This is where the end game makes me want to cry a little bit. Okay. So, a common misconception about bishops of opposite color is that they are a draw. Now, that misconception comes from positions without any other pieces. And we're going to see that in this game. Once the rooks disappear, it will be harder to win, even with extra pawns, because the pawns can't advance past the other person's color. And what do we mean? We mean here that white is the master of the light squares and black is the master of the dark squares. So, because one side is the master of a particular color, that means that they should strive for an initiative on that color. And if they get it, then they're going to be up a piece on that color. So rook c7 for sure. We're about to see some chess crimes, my friends. a3, chess crime. Like I can't do it. I can't talk about it. It hurts me too much. f5. Oh gosh, that's a screamer. You need to play, boss. Bishop b6. Once you stop the rook from penetrating, you're back in the business. You're back in, man. You're back in. He's not messing with you anymore. All right. Now, should he have taken with E? Maybe. EF makes sense to me. For sure he should play EF. I don't even know what we're saying. He should play EF. Why? Because that pawn on F5 will become an attacking force on its own. Oh, my chess friends. It is hard for me to express in words how much this move, rook c8, pains me. Oh, it really hurts. Okay. Now, what is white thinking? He's thinking something like, well, if I allow rook d2, he's going to get a little play. Well, it's kind of true. But this is just boss. Oh, no. Like, if we go back just a second, and we play EF. Okay, rook d2. Rook c7. We're in trouble, man. Yes, you get the pawn on f2. You can take it any way you like. But we're playing rook f7. We're going to win that pawn on g7. Then this pawn's going to create a mating net. It's going to come fast. It's going to actually come kind of fast. Okay. Okay. So, rook c8. Now, is this a draw? It should be. Why? Because the extra pawn on the queen side is meaningless. Okay, they go back and forth. Draw. Kirk. This one's called Kirk Breaks My Heart. Let's check it out. Against Barbar aus Bielefeld. Ich wohnte in Bielefeld 97 bis 99. Here we go. B4, I love it. C3, I love it. D4, I love it. And the guy plays knight a5. Okay. Now, you write bishop e2 is the most popular move. Let's just say you play the Evans. Yeah, they can do all kinds of weird stuff. I want to say I believe in bishop d3, though. So let's give bishop d3 a chance. E takes. And here, I think one of the cool ideas in the Evans is almost any time they do this ED4 thing, you can just say, what? What do you want? And you castle. And they can take on c3, but they're really asking for it then, right? And the difference we can see, like in the game, where we got ED, CD, and then D5, and then it's truly the case that, say, after this, our rook isn't coming to E1 as quickly as we'd like, right? Okay, you're still doing great, though. Boom, boom, and this kind of breaks my heart. Just castle first, boss, and then you break my heart again by playing bishop D2. You've got the initiative, boss. Play stuff like queen c2. Yeah. And what is he? Then he's able to, like, he's able to stop your initiative here. So the initiative is fundamentally, like, grounded to a halt. Why? Because you're a bishop lover. You wanted the bishop so much. You got it. Okay. Now, is the guy doing good? Yeah, he's doing all right. Was that the most accurate? No. All right. Bishop a5. All right. Now, in a lot of ways, Kirk, it's got to be said, it's not you that breaks my heart, it's him that breaks my heart. Oh, gosh, that's a heartbreaker. It just makes me want to die. What do we got? We got bishops of opposite color. What's important in bishops of opposite color? The initiative. So, what's the natural move that black should be looking for? Rook b8. Rook b8. Let's party. It's time to party. It's time to party, my friends. Okay. Passive. Now, oh, man, oh, man. So what is this? This is a draw. Now, one of the things about this position, normally I wouldn't cover this, is I want you guys to see this is somebody in Kirk who is, with the openings, is at least a 1900 player. You saw it. He's playing the Evans with pizzazz, too. But in the end game, it's not 1900. Rook c2, passive. Weird. And now a screamer, king f8. So one of the things I notice in these positions is people often, like, lose track of what it is they're doing or don't have a sense of what they're doing. He has one, you got one job, my friend, and that is to deal with some kind of rook c6. And, you know, now he does it. And all you had to do was play rook d6 yourself. And then it's easy. Now it's a little tough. Rook e6. Now, should the guy take? Yes. And when you write, my gut feeling says that white was slightly better here. Let me make that more precise. With the pawn in game, you're either winning or drawing. And the answer is, I think you're probably, it's probably lost. Why? Because we have two advantages. We have two advantages. We have not only the weakened pawn structure, but we've got the better king. Oh yeah, this is nasty. This is real nasty. I was about to give a note to Bene, but there's no reason for any notes and any Benes. White's gonna crush him here. Okay. And then if you want to get really technical here, too, we gotta say, you gotta get ready, I guess, to be passive here with rook a8. In which case, you might not be lost, but it's looking grim. Because rook e6, I think, is genuinely lost. But white breaks my heart, and now it's a draw again. Did they make it more complicated than they should? Maybe, but here we go. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Kaspar's been with us for a while. Oh, I want to make an announcement. So we had this May-June classical tournament, and there were some of my students had complaints and griefs, and more complaints and more griefs, that like they had games scheduled and some guy just like left, or some guy was just like incommunicado, and so the tournament kind of broke down at that point. So what we're doing for the next one is we're calling it the Dojo Verified Tournament. And what that means is that you will be like verified as to your actual identity. And the hope is, and I think you have to pay a nominal fee with the Patreon. It's not that much. And so the idea is, by creating those two barriers, we will do two things. The tournament will become more serious, i.e. less people doing stuff like dropping out or just like forgetting about it for a while. And two, by giving real names to the people, to not only cut back on cheating, but to give, even if you feel like there's not that much cheating in the dojo, which I earnestly do feel, at least much less in normal online chess, but to also give the feeling that when people are playing, that you're not being cheated against, because that's almost worse than being cheated on itself, is the persistent feeling that you're being cheated upon. That is the worst. And so hopefully this verified tournament will help in that regard. So anyways, I encourage you to do that, and maybe we could get one of the mods to post Kostya's link. He just put that on Twitter. You can post the link there in the box. That'll give me an opportunity to suck on my next lozenge and tell you the other announcement, which I did earlier, but I want to do it again, which is that this show in its traditional format is coming to an end with this month. Quick history, I started this thing ages ago. It was originally a chess.com show. Was like an hour. Loads of people wanted to do it. And then somebody at chess.com was like, bro, you should do a 3-hour show. And I was like, really? That's pretty long. Anyways, for whatever reason, we kept the format here at the dojo. And my general sense of life direction, both in a larger context and with this show, is that quality is better than quantity. And so going forward, what we're going to do is I will still cover your games. And the requirements will still basically be that you do a complete analysis, a thoughtful analysis, mostly without the computer, and submit it. And the idea is then, instead of a big old show with a bunch of games, I'll just do your game, and then hopefully the quality will be good enough that we can put it up on Chess Dojo. So, on the Chess Dojo YouTube. And so the general idea we have going forward is that all you have to do is be like a Patreon tier 4 subscriber. I think it's like $25 a month or something like that. And the cool thing that we'll do then is, like, we will cover your games, and you can say, oh, I want Proust to cover this game, or I want Cry to do this thing, because I'm a cruel dude and not everybody's into my cruelties. I get it. And Kostya's so nice, and he's got that avocado toast feel. And I can understand if you want avocado toast, and I think he's even got a man bun now. Oh, that would be hard to submit a game to a man bun kind of guy. Anyways, you can submit your game to either or all the people that you want, and we'll cover it. And hopefully, like I said, it'll be of a good enough quality that we can do a YouTube video on it. And I like, personally, to have the experience kind of like I had with Julio's game, where I can go really deep into the game and think about some of the decisions, not just once, but again and again. A lot of times I show the games to students, and I get their perceptions on the game, and then also, I can think about it. It gives me a chance to think about it again. Okay, so here we go. This is Kaspar. Okay. By the way, he mentions correctly that last month I was not around. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. And my life was a disaster last month. I played in the worst tournament of my life. That happened the final weekend. And also I was moving. But my life has simmered down now. Okay. So we got some notes according to Watson and stuff. Knight e2, obviously, mildly controversial move. It's fine. C5's weird. Castles. Let's call castles a little bit more normal. Okay. A3, ambitious. Snip, snop. Snip, snop. Castles. And I believe black should be fine here. If white wants to claim an advantage, it has to do with this beautiful dark square bishop, right? Now, Kaspar notes that c5 is the most ambitious move here. But I gotta say, with the move c5, it's not the kind of move you want to do if you're not really sure of it, because you're already down in time, and there's going to be some big questions to answer after c5. In particular, what's the game going to look like after, say, b6, b4, a5? It's not clear to anybody, I don't think. It's the kind of thing, though, if some GM had turned on his stockfish before the game, then yeah, maybe you could do it. But I'm just saying, you should not be critical about your move CD. Very natural move. And the sense of it here is simply to say your two bishops are beautiful. And he has an interesting choice himself here of should he play ED or CD. Now, you thought that knight takes d5 was an exclam move. I don't know. I'm not sure about that at all. Bishop on c8's funky, and imagine bishop d3, knight c6, castles. I don't think you're worse. No, I'd rather be white. You've got some beautiful bishops, and he's got a problem with the bishop on c8. You actually continue this here. Queen f6, and now bishop e3. Queen f6 is controversial because you're not dealing with the bishop on c8. So sure, bishop e3. Development, you're doing great. You're doing great. Okay. So, actually I want to read this note. He says, knight d4, snip, snop, knight c3, queen z3, king g8 with an academic advantage. I gotta wonder. It's interesting to think about what do we mean by. I think what he means by academic advantage is that it's not a big deal. You know, sometimes we say academic in a demeaning kind of way, and I like that use. It's kind of fun to make fun of the academics. But here, I would definitely say it's non-academic because we're up in time. It's our move. We already have the queen out, and bishops of opposite color. We should be able to turn that development advantage into something real. I would say we're up 2 tempi. We're up 3 tempi because he owes us a pawn move to get the bishop out. It's our move, number 2, and 3, our queen's already on c3 where it's kind of useful. Okay, so ED. Bishop e2 is okay. Now you could have aimed for like a bishop e3 position, but let's give this a chance. Controversial. And now knight e4. Okay. So let's say the obvious. Your bishop g5 created this situation where white has your unopposed bishop, where white has got this beautiful business going on here. Now here's an interesting moment for you. You played this move with an exclam. It's interesting. What's weird about it to me, though, is it doesn't make that much sense to me if black doesn't take on g3, right? Then the bishop, I feel, is just kind of stranded on g3. I.e., what would our next move be if it wasn't, what's white's next move? You mentioned rook c1 as I think is a Navarra game. I also think, I don't know exactly, but this one also struck me as interesting, where if rook takes d4, I would be concerned if I was black about the rook becoming stranded. I don't know how true that is or anything. That just would be, definitely a concern. In any case, bishop h5, knight g3, and you have one of my favorite comments here. You write, true bishop love, definitely. This is a man obsessed with bishops. And your bishop, a way to, I think, to make a story out of it is your bishop on g5 drove the guy crazy. First to do h6, g5, weakening his king. Then knight takes g3 to give your rook access to the f-file. And then your bishop meaning in life by connecting with the rook. Good move. Okay, Casper. Now here's a move. If you're gonna make me want to scream, this would be it, buddy. You play queen f6. No. Oh man, Casper. Oh man. We got a question about bishop f6. Wasn't it stronger earlier? Here, it's a thought actually, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. Now I assume what you were thinking, Dr. Jammy, is that we got like knight c7 here. But I think queen d6, it's going to be hard not to lose the d pawn. For example, bishop f3, bishop e6. And I'm guessing black is okay. That's my guess. Okay. Terrible move. Now, rook f8, passive, but we're not interested in his moves at the moment. We're interested in yours. Queen f6. This is a real screamer, Casper. This is a real screamer. And one of the things I really want to encourage people to do when they write notes is to talk conceptually about what's going on. Because, during the game, you're going to want to have the words in the back of your mind about just what is the general story of what's happening here. And the problem with queen f6 is, to me, it's neglecting the bigger story, which is, hey, my king should be stronger than his king. And queen f6 is going to mean that his king is actually then going to be very quickly stronger than our king because it gets to play king g7. Right? So it's a weird, queen f6 is a weird, like I'm trying to imagine why you do it, Casper, and I guess to me it's something about, wanting to relieve the pressure or the tension, psychological tension. Of course, it does nothing of the sort. We're still going to have loads of problems. But in this position, boss, yeah, you're doing great. Look at those pieces. Bishop on e6 is terrible. The whole thing. So I think you gave, what variation did you give here? Queen e3. Okay. Rook a d1 also makes sense to me. and you're doing great. And like you said, you shouldn't be worried about sacrificing the pawns. But on the other hand, I don't think you have to sacrifice the pawns anyway if you don't want to. Let's say this position. Are you doing great? I don't see why not. Seems like you're doing great to me. And this is just a very unambitious way of playing, right? So I don't think you needed to, you didn't even need to be fancy if you don't want to with the sacrificing of the pawns. Okay, so this was the turning point of the game. Good. All right, so now, one of the key features of the game that I want people to see is Black's king is actually better than ours. And are the weird double pawns a deal for White? I don't know. But the bishop on h5 is definitely now owes us time to come back. And now he does a nice little dance. Yeah. And now we gotta say Black is better. Check to the miserable king. It would be very hard to play king g1 here. So you took. And now you say rook e1 question mark. But I gotta say, I love this position here for Black. And this, as you say, we've talked about this on the show, the Fischer endgame. I'd say this is close to lost. This is close to lost for the guy. And the basic way of playing it would be something like rook c1, king f2, bishop e6. You don't need to be fancy. Your rook is penetrated. You're going to start dominating. It's going to be very hard for White to move. Bring the king in. Okay, you're correct. Rook c5 is weird. Basically, White doesn't have any ideas here. Definitely wrong for him to allow b4. I think you could have played AB here with some hopes of even playing for an advantage after AB. Because now your rook gets cut off. But okay, here we go. Total draw. Total draw. Okay, Casper, good game. This one is a weird one. McPhear, I think this is McPhear's first game time on the show. Knight d4, mistake, because the queen, even though in searching for Bobby Fischer, you're not supposed to bring your queen out early, in this position, the queen can't be readily harassed. Now, what should White play? Definitely, boss. Play e5. White's winning. The knight doesn't have any nice squares. So, d6 for Black. We still want e5. And now this one's a weird one, where I'm assuming, I think e5 just wins. Well, it's going to win something, because e5, knight moves, bishop e7, queen e7, knight d5. Yeah. And because I'm a chess maniac, I just came up with the following variation in my head. Something like this. And then I'm going to claim that White's winning in this position. That's a little much cry. There's no need for such extravagance. In any case, he shouldn't be playing f3. There's no need. Snippos for the hippos. c5 was certainly a move there. Now we get this big trade. Now weird move, bishop d3. Why is it weird? Because it gives up a pawn. Okay. Rook e1 seems like White should hold without any problem, because it's very difficult for Black to do anything other than just sit with rook d7, right? He can't allow any kind of bishop f8, rook e8 business. Rook d1, snip, snop, and now Black's just up a pawn, bro. We're just up a pawn. Thank you. Terrible move. In general, my friends, do not trade when you're down a pawn to a pawn endgame. The worst. Black will create a passed pawn on the queen side. Game over. We're going to see some weird stuff. Now, what's the standard move here? c5, king c6, b5. Can't be stopped. That we will create a passed pawn. He finally does it. b5 is correct. Or as the fancy people like to say, b5 was indicated. I don't know. Okay, finally it happens. And check this out, you guys. Black resigns. Whenever, you know it's a Lichess file whenever it says normal. I don't know why Lichess always says it there. At the end of their little annotations, they're always like, normal. What does that mean, Lichess? Hey, Lichess, what does it mean when you say normal? That always freaks me out. Okay. So Black resigned. I don't know why. I don't know why it looks winning to me. All right. You know, people are talking a lot about, you know, the whole transgender stuff and people changing. Well, let me tell you, Paul, he did his own trans thing, man. He was once Paul in New Jersey. He's now Paul 1E4. So you can do that in the chess world. You can totally rebrand yourself. You can become a new person. And Paul has become a new person. We got 2 games of Paul coming up in the next little bit here. In fact, the next 2 games are dedicated to Paul. So, now Paul, let's switch the colors because Paul's black. Paul's openings, great, dude, great. I think Paul's openings are some of the best. And I like this approach to the Danish. Don't take that thing. Give it back. And now we're going to get this interesting IQP. Ambitious. Okay. Poor, bishop d2. White should be playing bishop e2 and castles. And I think she's maybe got a small advantage. You could take on c3. Weird. Okay, weird. Now, white should play bishop e3 because the queen is misplaced on e7. She goes to the endgame. Incorrect, because now you, Paul, are playing against the IQP. She takes, and now you're still playing against the IQP, and the pawns aren't too bad, and you got the unopposed light square bishop. Good move. Okay. Good. And let's say up to this point, Paul, you've played great, dude. You've played great. And white has one plan, and that's to play on the dark squares with moves like knight a4 and knight c5. So, here you say you should have played bishop takes c3. I don't know. I'm not 100% sold on bishop c3. Knight d7 comes to mind. Rook h e8 comes to mind. Knight d5 comes to mind. Yeah. So let's look. The problem with rook d6 is a little bit tactical. It's not immediately obvious, but the thing I want you to see, Paul, about rook d6 is you're passively defending the pawn on c6. So imagine, what's white going to do? Well, maybe she's going to move the knight on c3. The second she moves the knight, you can play bishop d5. Or if you're very concerned, you could think about playing bishop d5 immediately. But this isn't going to help. Good move, a3, and we got to say, good move from your opponent. And now you're in a little grief. Knight c5, exclam. And now I guess you're toast. Right? The game goes on, but as far as I can tell, it's over. Right? So good move, good finish from your opponent. And, you know, this one, Paul, of all the, you know, I've yelled at you a lot over the years. But I want to say rook d6, it's kind of a move that I can see a lot of players making because they want to double, they want to defend the pawn, and you're just not being aware about knight a4, c5. But that one was, I mean, that's a little tougher. This position, though, by the way, I think you're doing great. I love your unopposed bishop. And there are a couple technical challenges, but in general, I think you're doing fantastic in this position. The bishop on e3 is unimpressive. Excuse all my coughing. All right, now though, my friends. Oh, I gotta go grab this game. Excuse me for a second. I somehow lost it in my excitement, but I can easily get it. So Ricker, let me tell a story while I'm getting this thing. Ricker, dude, has been on the show forever. And, oh man, we're talking about a dude who started off, without, just beginning chess. This was before the chess boom, by the way. There's a lot of people, there's much more people like Ricker out there now. And it's an interesting phenomenon where you've got people just coming to the game, putting a lot of energy into it. And it's interesting to see where they go. I think our friend Joe from before, my guess is he hasn't been playing that long either, but he's clearly got some huge energy. Story from the dojo. We got DM Hokie. Okay, let me tell you a quick story about DM Hokie. He's the guy behind all our gifts and all this other stuff. Beautiful guy. Now this guy, he put together the list of games for today, which I'm very thankful for. It's a lot of work to just collate, bring together all those games, and he put them in a file. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. You got this chess file. So I go, DM Hokie, buddy, are you using ChessBase to put this together? He's like, yeah, I am. And so imagine you got somebody using ChessBase who's never even been to a tournament before. DM Hokie's never even been to a tournament. That's how new he is to the chess world. Never been to a tournament. Amazing to me. Anyways, so there we go. This is Ricker. He is black against our favorite Paul 1E4. Used to be Paul in New Jersey. G3, D5, good move. Bishop G2, D4, probably correct. Now, the interesting thing about this position, Ricker, is that a certain kind of player as white is going to be totally happy here, and that is the person who plays the King's Indian with black, because he's going to play D6 and F4 and Knight F3 and just be happy as a clam. So, whether or not you are doing great here, Rickard, depends on the next couple moves. I think Harry the H-pawn would be an interesting question right now for white. H5. What would white do after H5? I think that would be a nice question to ask Paul 1E4. Because if he gets what he gets here, then I think he's doing pretty good. Bishop D6. You could consider Knight G4 here. Here again, you could consider Knight G4. The trick of Knight G4 is that if he plays H3, we're going to whack, play Knight E3 and take his good bishop. Will it be very complicated at that point? It will. But all I can tell you from experience is I'm not sure white likes it. For example, on Queen C1, there's Knight D4. And on C3, he's got to worry about this pawn, right? So really kind of an interesting mess. And let's just, as the old GMs like to say, the pawn on E3 isn't off the board yet. Okay, here we go. Castles, castles. H3. Now, check it out, Rickard. I think his move was weak, and he should have played F5. Now, F5 might well have been uncomfortable for you, but I don't think H3 was weak. He does, in general, want to slowly do the kingside creep on you. And one great thing, Rickard, is ignorance is sometimes bliss, because if you had known about the King's Indian, you'd be like, oh, bro, I'm getting the wedge. I'm getting wedgied here, man. I'm getting wedgied here. He's going to come F5. Thirsty Monster. Dude, thank you for rating us. Thirsty Monster, we're about to see Rickard not get a wedgie. He almost got wedgied, but it was like that painful bathroom moment where you just escape. He's just going to manage to escape. Okay, so you write Knight H5, his timid move, followed by my bold move. What you got to understand, Rickard, is the king side's his side of the board, bro. His pawns are pointing this way. Yours are going this way. So if you've lost the opportunity to do the spice of life, knight g4, knight e3, you got to start some drama on the other side of the board. And knight h5, eventually you're just going to get pushed past. f5, and you say, here it is, doesn't look good at all. I think he's doing great. I think he's doing fantastic. Now you do manage to give him a question with g6. And here I'm not sure that Paul did his best in responding. Let's give him his first move and say his first move probably isn't so bad. Bishop h6, rook e8. So here's Paul in New Jersey. Excuse me, Paul in New Jersey, who has transitioned. He's transitioned to Paul 1e4. I think, let's look at it from his point of view for a second. Your play is on the king side, and your force count over there is amazing. Now, I'm sure you're concerned about losing the f-pawn. I don't think you should be. You should say to yourself, all drama on that side of the board is to my advantage, not to his advantage. And GF is not, I don't think it's a threat. I don't think it's a threat. So for example, you could play g4 now, or just calmly play queen d2, I'm gonna guess. It's looking real good. I think this is insane for two reasons. One, EF, but number two, you could just do this cold-blooded move where you're gonna land on knight f5 soon. Maybe that might be too much after f4, but in general, do you want this business? Yeah, you want that business. So I think you're doing great here, Paul 1e4. And if anything, Paul 1e4, the thing that I want you to be aware of, we've talked about this before, is that you have a very developed opening repertoire. You understand a lot about chess themes and ideas in the opening, but then there often comes a point where you play an ambitious opening and then you don't have the nuts to follow it up. And that's how you get yourself in trouble, as in the last game. Play a passive move, get yourself in trouble. Or here, where Ricker, you're going to give Ricker the game of his life, man. Game of his life. Okay, here we go. Let's celebrate Ricker. Takes. Knight g5. Okay. Now, is Ricker still in a little bit of trouble? Yeah, he is. Bishop e7. Probably a good move, Ricker. And what I like about it is your bishop on d6 is poor, and it's coming around the mountain to do something. Is it incredibly scary, though? Yes, it is. You give him the bishop, and let's say that's a concession, after which, I was going to again call him Paul, New Jersey. I'm misgendering him. I'm misgendering him, man. Sorry, it's Paul 1e4. So you give him the unopposed bishop, and this is going to temporarily relieve the pressure, but especially after the g6 move, he's got the dark squares. Rook f2. There were other moves. Here, good move. Here, rook f8. Now, I want to say, Paul in New Jersey, you're doing great, bro. You're doing great. And it's this position that makes me want to cry, though. Okay? Because shouldn't you want to play a move like bishop f6? And isn't that like really hard to meet? It looks deadly, man. It looks really rough. And queen e1, I don't get it, man. I don't get it. You're playing so FG relinquished a lot of the play on the king side, but you're still got it going on, especially with that unopposed bishop. Bishop h6 also looks better than queen e1. Knight b4. Now look, you're making Ricker frisky over here. Rook f6. Bam. Uh-oh. Now there's trouble. Bishop f7. All right, Ricker, here we go, buddy. Here we go. a3. That just makes me want to cry, bud. What are we doing? Why are you playing a3? No, I don't comprende. Now you give him your good bishop. Ricker pushes you away a little bit, does a little knight dance. b5. Now Ricker's getting frisky. Now he's angry. You made Ricker angry, man. Look at that. Ricker says no. Ricker says no. Ricker says no. And here, I think you want to be well, for sure, you want to be thinking about g5 here. Good move, Ricker. Centralize the queen. That's what they tell us to do. Not sure I get it. Obviously, in the last couple moves, we could have some debates about what's going on. I don't understand that move. And now check out Ricker's about to throw the bombs here, my friends. Bam! And that's Ricker's highest rated win ever, my friends, ever. And we got to say, Paul in New Jersey's been a real good sport because I know that he's played several games against Ricker. So I want you people in the chat just to give it up for Ricker here, buddy. Look at that. Ricker's taking down a dude. I mean, Paul, dude, he's like 1,800 or something, man. This is a real win. This is, you're taking on a guy. Imagine this. You're an old dude, even older than me, and that's pretty old. And you start playing chess, and you don't know anything. You're just playing. You're trying. You're fighting. And within a couple years, not that long, you beat an 1,800? Dang, that's pretty real. Chess Late he's been playing a long time, and he's got the advantage of youth. I don't know if he's ever beaten an 1,800. I don't know. All right, let's move on to our final game. And I got to give my voice to rest here. We got Storms. I think he's new to the show. H6, okay. Now the very fancy GMs don't like D6 and want to play A6 because of knight A4. Is it a big deal? I don't know. Depends. Back in the day, they wouldn't have thought this is a big deal, but nowadays, people really love the bishops. Okay. H3. Now, the problem for us here, Michael, is not only you, but many people will have trouble here conceiving of a plan. It's not easy. And what we're going to say is in the next couple moves, you lose the thread. Very easy, impossible to do in these positions. And if you're a 1e4 player, what you should say to yourself is, you know, as long as you kind of have a sense of what's going on, you will be a dangerous dude. Like, you could study until you're blue in the face all the different plans that black could do here, turn on the computer, but really you just want to learn to think about it. Like, for example, as black, I think bishop e6 makes a lot of sense. Okay, bishop d7, knight h2. And Michael writes question mark. I don't think it's necessarily a bad move, Michael. He's got a simple plan, and that is to play f4 to activate his rook. It's that simple. And not only that, but now on this move, it's hard to know what you should do. I don't know. I don't know what you should do here. It's actually a little bit difficult. Maybe bishop e6 again. f4, good move. d5, good move. Good move. Yeah. So you give knight e7 a question mark, but if it has this as its intention, it can't be that bad. Okay, so bishop e5, we're going to guess that he missed knight e3. Now the weird thing is, does he have full compensation after this anyway? Interesting question. Now queen e7, if we were talking to your opponent here, we would say, boss, don't ever even dream about giving up this guy. Queen f6, and now your opponent definitely blows it with queen takes b7. I'm going to assume he missed queen c6. So Michael, we got to say, you win the first round of this game, and you now have a winning position. And the next couple moves you play are mostly okay. We're just going to do a couple criticisms here. Good, good. And I want to say I like that a lot, especially from a practical point of view. You're just saying to the dude, no, you are not going to mess with me on the diagonal. Bishop d3. Now here, I want you to organize c5. So for example, c5 right away might run into c4, d5. So one simple thing you could do is bishop e6, and you're just going to play c5 no matter what. And one of the basic things I want to mention in this regard is, in general, the rooks want the open files. So another move would be rook fe8. Has to also be good. Once the rooks become active, then they're going to be monsters. Until they're active, they're only better in terms of their potential. For some reason, Aristotle's differentiation between the actual and the potential flashed before my eyes, and so we could have a whole philosophical discussion based on Aristotelian metaphysics about the rook. And it's it's kind of, obviously I'm bringing it up kind of as a joke, but there's some truth to it, that the rook, like the rook on f8, there's no reason to think right now that it's any better than the white pieces. It needs a little love first. It needs a little cultivation. And that's what you need to be thinking about instead of, Michael, moves like that. That's a gross one. That's a gross one. His knight fixes itself, and now you lose a pawn. And now all of a sudden we gotta say, I don't know, we gotta say really it's no longer a clear business what's happening here. I don't even know who I like better anymore, you know? I don't. Because of a4, and because it's gonna be hard not to lose the pawn on d5. Good moves by white. Rook d6. Now, king f2 would be far more reasonable from your opponent here. So this was, actually I just want to say, Michael, kind of like, well, definitely like Joe. Listen to what he writes. This was my first over-the-board tournament. Wow. Wow. I think it's such an interesting time for chess that we've got people who can play at this level. You played in a lot of ways a good game. And if this is your first tournament, you should feel great, man. I wasn't this strong in my first tournament. And here, my message is, rooks want to be active. So, check to the miserable king. That's why you should have played king f2 first. Check to the pawn. Check to the pawn, and now you at least have counterplay, right? Okay. You guys, thank you so much. I want to say we got Helston coming up in just a couple seconds, so I got to get the heck out of here. And I want to make two announcements. Number one, the next Dojo tournament is going to be structured a little bit differently. It's going to be great. You're going to be verified. Everybody's going to be verified. That means we're going to have people, you got to have a real identity to play, and we're going to try to make the cheating question less prominent by doing so. And also for it to be a little bit more serious. Like I said, some of my students complaining that their opponents just kind of up and leave at random moments, and then they can't get their game, and then everybody's upset, and then, oh my God, Cry, can you help me out? Cry, can you talk to Kostya? Can you talk to David? Can you talk to Tiamoki? Can you help me out, Cry, I'm dying. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we got, next month is gonna be a little different, and I am gonna try to do game analysis. I want to keep doing it, but it's got to be, I'm going to try to do quality over quantity. So instead of doing some massive show, I'm going to do it this way. If you submit a game to me, or Kostya or David, but with me it's going to be, there's a special requirement that it has to be annotated pretty fully, and these games should give you an indication of the kind of annotations I want. I didn't pick any games that weren't annotated. Annotated fully, and then you got to be this Patreon level number 4, which supports not only the game analysis, but all kinds of other cool stuff you get from the dojo. And then I will think deeply about that. And a lot of these games, you can tell probably, I mean, it's a lot of games. So some of them are processing more in the back of my mind than others. Like the Julio game, I was thinking about that a lot, man. So that's gonna be my intention, and I'm gonna try to make like a professional, I don't do really anything professional. I'm gonna try to make a nice YouTube video of every game that I analyze. Okay, stay tuned for Helston. I'm out of here. See you in the dojo. I gotta fix myself. I gotta get right with the world. Bye-bye, everybody.